It is Wednesday. You have made it more than halfway through the work week. We are getting ready to get into Friday Eve. That's tomorrow. So we got a lot to cover today. Welcome to the Sean Spicer Show. Hunter Biden pleaded not guilty to a gun charge that he had already pled guilty to. Wow. We'll break that down. Government spending. I think we're all in agreement. We are headed for a government shutdown on October 1st. And Kevin McCarthy in the hot seat trying to figure out if there's actually a deal, getting heat from both sides of his members. We'll break that all down. Plus, more aid to Ukraine. President Zelensky of Ukraine is in the U.S. He's talking to the UN, but then he's headed to Washington. And I don't think he's going to have the same reception that he had 9 months ago. We'll talk all about that. Plus, activist and organizer Scott Presler. You may be following him on Twitter. You may have seen his work in the past. He is out there hitting the pavement, actually registering people to vote for Republican candidates. He's going all throughout the country. What's it like? What is he doing? Who's supporting him? How is he actually getting this done without the support of the National Party? We will break it all down to you. Let's get into it. All right. Well, I've been continued to be blessed and just shocked, frankly, by the amount of support we're getting for the show. So thank you for that. I love the people who are sharing this with their friends. I got a couple nice emails, in fact, through my website, SeanSpicer.com, and through my locals, SeanSpicer.locals.com, saying, we found you after Newsmax. I'm so excited to get you back. Thank you for that. Please make sure you are subscribing and getting those notifications. This is how we get judged, whether we're growing and doing well. And because of you and your support, we are. So thank you for that. But the more you can share and tell people where I am, where we are growing and where we can be helpful, that's it. So Apple Podcast is super helpful. Always the audio version these days, but then obviously YouTube and Rumble as well. And I appreciate everybody tuning in on the first as well if you have DirecTV. Well, some of the big news that came out since last night's show, Hunter Biden is pleading not guilty to the gun charges specifically. Now, you might remember he had 3 charges levied against him, and there was an indictment about this gun that he purchased in 2018. What it all stems from is he made a false statement on the federal form, and then once he got the gun, he possessed it. Now, the Dems are saying it was just 11 days because then it was thrown into a trash can near a school. I digress. But at the end of the day, he lied about his drug use on federal form. Now, here's the thing. He already pled guilty to this. Now, I know that probably legally they say you can't use that. But we know that if you're the prosecutor and you know that he's already pled guilty, then you know you got a pretty good case. Secondly, he filled out a form saying he wasn't using drugs. Well, the guy wrote a book saying he was using drugs. He tested positive when he was in the U.S. Navy for doing drugs. That's what got him kicked out. Okay. And he has been very open in his speeches and his interviews about using drugs. So I'm not really sure how you plead guilty to say, yeah, I checked a box saying I wasn't using drugs, but I've been very open publicly in several forums about using drugs. That's kind of a tough one to come back on. I mean, as a prosecutor, I'd be like, this is a layup. I'll take that one. I'll take the the gun one. Obviously, I don't know how you plead not guilty, though, because you've said it so often and you've been pretty blatant that you did use it. As I noted many times, I think it's really interesting to see these Democrats, by the way, who claim that there's nothing to see here. It's also interesting, and I had someone tell me this after the show yesterday. They're like, I heard that, you mentioned that he's suing the IRS. Dude, I think at some point the lawyers were like, maybe a little less. Yeah, we don't need to ratchet it up. But he is going after those IRS agents. I mean, this is a guy who didn't pay his taxes for 2 years and then wrote off a bunch of really shady stuff that there isn't an accountant in the world that could tell you can do that. Wrote off his adult kids' education, the use of strippers. And, I just don't know how you think that's a normal deduction. But that's not even what this is about. This is just the gun stuff. So we'll see. Also, up on Capitol Hill right now, or earlier today, Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, he was facing the Judiciary Committee. Remember, yesterday we had Jim Jordan, the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee here. This this is going to be a long time coming, man. I mean, the fireworks were going all day long. The Republicans were loaded for bear. Garland knew that this was not going to go well. He was trying to make the case, I'm not the president's lawyer. I'm not Congress's prosecutor. Look, I think that this is an opportunity for the American public to see what's happening, though. This Justice Department getting asked over and over again about these indictments, the tactics that are used to pull out, if you will, the two-tier system of justice that's happening. I mean, this is unbelievable. And so good on the Republicans for getting the heat on the Attorney General. He needed to know, I think this sunlight, this disinfectant, this transparency that we're able to see gives people an understanding of what's really going on. And him sitting there and saying, I can't answer. I still think that that's helpful because they get to watch the process and they get to watch the Attorney General saying, I can't talk about that. Of course you can. You're choosing not to. All right. But a lot more to get into because this government spending deal is not looking good. And I want to get to that in just a second. But before I do, I want to tell you a little bit about Delta Rescue. You guys have heard me talk about them before. They are an amazing organization that is on a lifelong mission to help animals that have been saved for the wilderness, that are abandoned, that don't have a home, that need care. Dogs, cats, horses, you name it. Delta Rescue is the largest care for life animal sanctuary in the entire world. And I've told you before, I've rescued 3 dogs. When you go to the shelter, you're always trying to figure out, are these guys, is this a kill shelter or a no-kill shelter? Some shelters just don't have the capacity. They don't, especially after COVID. They just didn't have the capacity or the funding. Delta Rescue, through our contributions and our contributions alone, provides all of these rescued animals with a place to play and be loved. They give them nutrition, veterinary care. We can be proud of that. If you are an animal lover, please go to deltarescue.org and support them because, as I said, they rely entirely on our contributions. $5, $10, whatever you can do, $100. It goes directly to those animals. They'll send you a newsletter. They'll make sure you know about the work that they're doing. You can call them and speak to them and hear firsthand if that's what you want to do. But go to deltarescue.org, and help support this great organization that is stepping in and filling a huge void for abandoned animals that have nowhere else to go. All right, let's get back to what's the big issue in Washington right now. Government spending. The fiscal year comes to an end at the end of September, so we are not that far away. On October 1st, if there is not a plan in place, everything shuts down. And normally you get 1 or 2 bills done of the 12 appropriations bills. Right now they got 1. They don't even have the defense bill done, and that's usually the easy one. Some of these folks in the House said no way. So this is going to have profound consequences. People who are in the military are going to feel it in a way that they haven't before because they're usually always taken care of. Now, people will argue, they'll all get paid back and whatever. I'm sorry, I get that. But if you're living paycheck to paycheck, you might get paid back in 30 days or 60 days. But if you got rent to pay, if you have a car payment or a credit card payment, or you just got to get food, that matters. And I think we have to understand that for a lot of folks in the military and a lot of folks at the lower end of the scale, this is a big deal. So where do we stand? Here's the deal. There was a deal to put a plan in place. I mentioned this yesterday. The House Main Street Partnership with the more moderate folks and the Freedom Caucus. And with the Freedom Caucus, we're talking about Chip Roy of Texas, Byron Donalds of Florida, Scott Perry of Pennsylvania. These are the leaders of the conservative movement. These are folks that took over from Jim Jordan when he gave up the chairmanship of the Freedom Caucus. These guys were saying it was a good deal. It cut spending. It dealt with the border. But you've got a bunch of guys now that are saying, no way. Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene. The problem that I have is give some people a demand. Say, here's what we need. And it's all this jello. You can't. At this point, give us something. Because, by the way, the Senate has this bipartisan deal. What's being passed is just a starting point. But this is going to look so bad on Republicans who are up for re-election, who have a very narrow majority. So they got to get their act together and message better about what they're doing. I talked about this on a radio program this morning. Focus on the border. That's so obvious. The mayor of New York, the bluest city, is saying, He's appalled by what's happening, that his city's getting overwhelmed. So guess what, Republicans? Why don't you jam this administration and say, until you fund the border, until you close it, until you commit to more agents that you're allowed to do their job, that we won't do this. I can get on board on that. I think most Americans can do that. I bet you most Democrats can get on board. That would be a great thing. Come up with a plan. Right now, the Democrats are sitting back and looking like in awe, laughing. And they really are. Read the reports. But here's what's also happening. You have a group of 4 or 5 Republicans, which is all you need, who are willing to team up with the Democrats to pass what they call a clean continuing resolution. That's where we're going right now. These guys are willing to team up with them. And I'm just telling you, that's not going to go well. But their view is, hey, you guys can't get us a deal on the conservative side that we can sign off on, and it's a mess. So why don't we, 5 or 6 of us, team up with the Democrats, jam them, pass it through clean? That's what's going to happen if we don't see these guys get their act together. I mean, I got to tell you, from where I sit, this is the problem. If these guys, the Gateses, the Marjorie Taylor Greens and others, don't actually put something together and say, okay, here are our 5 demands. If we don't get this, but give them a target to shoot at. McCarthy right now is daring these guys to vote against it. But here's the deal, folks. We're in charge. This is the one branch that Republicans have. You have to govern when you're in charge. At some point, you make deals. And right now, the deal is pretty darn good. You heard Jim Jordan yesterday on the show. Jim Jordan is no wallflower. This is a guy who is literally, the North Star to a lot of these guys in the Freedom Caucus. And they're saying no. Chip Roy, hardly a wallflower. Scott Perry, Byron Donalds. Are you kidding me? These are the guys who held out on Kevin McCarthy becoming speaker for all these deals. They're saying that they're good with this 30-day short-term deal. Matt Gaetz went after Byron Donalds. Are you kidding me? I mean, this is where we are. This is a little ridiculous that suddenly we're saying that Byron Donalds and Chip Roy and Scott Perry aren't conservative enough, aren't fighting for it. Are you kidding me? I get it. Sometimes you don't even get everything you want, but I don't even know what Matt Gaetz wants. Put your cards on the table. Tell people what you want. But right now, this idea of nebulous, like, I don't know, it's not conservative enough, a Nancy Pelosi deal. Are you kidding me? That Chip Roy has fought more battles than Byron. I mean, these guys, to insult them like that is ridiculous. And Gaetz is further attacking his criticism of McCarthy. He's going down and he's saying that he'll oust McCarthy using this motion to vacate. Okay. McCarthy then dared him. Great. Move the effing motion, he said, according to a bunch of people who were in the room. At some point, guys, get your act together. Sit down and say, this is what we need to do to pass this thing. It's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be easy. I get it. But at some point, take the best deal you can and move forward. Because I've seen this movie before, and let me tell you how it ends. Not good. When Republicans shut down the government and the media and the Democrats go after every aspect of who's going to, not get their school trip and how many members of the military aren't getting paid and how many missions got shut down and what this means for our national security. You know who this is getting pinned on? Not Joe Biden. And right now, everybody's talking about Joe Biden and the level of incompetency of those policies, his age, his inability to do this job. We are literally taking the target, moving it from him and putting it on ourselves. And I don't even know why. Meaning, I don't know what the message is. What are these guys holding out for? Put some pressure on them. Like, start saying it's on you, and that's what McCarthy's willing to do. If my view is if you've got Jordan, Chip Roy, Byron Donalds, Scott Perry, all saying this is a deal worth fighting for, that pretty, means something to me. And it should mean something to all of us. So I'm just telling you, I think that what we better be very careful in the next 10, 11 days where we're headed. Because if we don't get our act together, we're going to lose that majority. This is what I was talking about with impeachment a while ago. And guess what? When we do that, we have nothing. And for 2 years, you're going to watch this Biden administration do whatever they can if we don't get the presidency back. All right. I want to tell you about the wellness company. I've told you guys about this before. It's a team of doctors, including Dr. Peter McCullough. You may recall him. He's been out front talking about alternative treatments during COVID, something that was banned, that no one was able to discuss, things like hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, all those things that the FDA and Fauci said we couldn't talk about them. Yeah, well, guess what? His team of doctors founded the wellness company, and it did so out of a commitment to allow people like us to take control of our health, which is why I want to talk to you about what they created, this supplement called Spike Support Formula. And Spike Support Formula was designed out of necessity to help find a combination of ingredients that would help block and dissolve COVID spike protein. Spike protein, if you've had a bout of COVID like this, is important to understand because there's actually something you can do about it to protect yourself. And thousands of people have taken this and reported better mental health clarity, reduced inflammation, and increased energy level. If you've had a bad bout of COVID, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You've still got this haze that exists. So go take Spike Support Formula daily to combat this. Go to twc.health, twc.health. So instead of .com, .health/Spicer, use the code Spicer to save 15% at checkout. That's twc.health/Spicer. If you enter code Spicer, you get 15% off. And, if you have someone who's dealt with all of this with COVID, they need it. Anyway. All right. Also in Washington, speaking of spending coming our way, Ukraine. Yep. There's a big push to spend more money on Ukraine. And President Zelensky was up at the UN. Biden spent all of yesterday at the UN talking about funding Ukraine and what it all means. But guess what? There is a big concern, both in the House and the Senate. He's going to come down, Zelensky, to Washington and make the case here. Now, the Senate is the Senate. But the interesting thing is this morning, Rand Paul came out and said, I don't really care. I'm not putting another nickel towards Ukraine. There's only so much he can do to stop it as one member, but I'm guarantee you he's going to gum this thing up. And that I don't think people in the Senate saw happening because I think the Senate was willing to give him this money. You realize we've spent $130 billion already in Ukraine? $130 billion. You think about it, we crossed $33 trillion in debt the other day. We're running a massive deficit. And now they're coming down here saying, hey, we want more money. And there's no accountability. I mean, that's what I think is so insulting as a taxpayer. Byron Donalds said, to be blunt, we're running a $2 trillion deficit and money we give to Ukraine, we're borrowing from our future. This is him continuing. What's happening with Ukraine is frankly the fault of the leadership of Joe Biden. Let's be very clear. So don't put that on the backs of the American people. Now, if we had a commander-in-chief who knew how to lead as opposed to take naps, then we would be in a much better situation when it comes to Ukraine. Right? Here's the thing. Not only have we given them money, we've been piecemealing this thing and we haven't been giving them what it takes to win. If we wanted to let them win, then stop this footseeing stuff with you can have this plane on this state, whatever. If you're truly helping them win, this has been botched. So you got McConnell and you got these other guys. They're going to be fine in the Senate. But I'm telling you, in the House, this is going to be a problem. Even if you get it past Rand Paul in the Senate. So keep an eye on this because I think in the House, McCarthy has decoupled this so it's not attached to another aid package, which is what they want, so you don't actually watch it happen. But I'll be very interested to see the reception that Zelensky gets. Because I think for a lot of these folks, they feel like, hey, we've spent a ton of money. We're not seeing the results. There's a bunch of corruption. You had to fire a bunch of people. I don't know. I mean, I think this is going to be a very interesting visit for him. Big difference from when it was 9 months ago when he came down the first time. And he actually had a much bigger reception. I think people felt much more sympathy then. Now I think it's, hey, we continue to spend a ton of money that we don't have. And I just don't see the support in the House to make it happen. I don't know where this thing is. We can't fund our own government right now. We're talking about this. 10 days to go and there's nothing. So how we suddenly say, by the way, we can't help ourselves, but we're going to help Ukraine. Strategically, I don't know how that's going to work. So he's going to have his work cut out for him when he bears down here right now. We'll see how that happens. All right. I know we're all trying to live a little bit healthier, eat better, maybe exercise a little more, but are you taking care of your liver? And I ask this because the latest data from the American Heart Association indicates that adults with fatty livers are 3.5 times more likely to have heart failure than those without. And you're thinking to yourself, well, I exercise, I eat right. This probably isn't an issue for me. But the American Liver Foundation says that 100 million Americans have fatty liver. So if you think about it, the odds are pretty good that a lot of us probably do have a fatty liver, although that's pretty disgusting to think about. But you think about all that we are throwing at our livers, right? I mean, cholesterol, alcohol, toxins, statin, cigarette smoke. There's a lot that our liver is being asked to do. 500 key functions daily. So many of us, as a result of that, end up with a sluggish and a fatty liver that makes us gain weight, lose energy. That's why it's happening. So think about it. What can we be doing? Well, there's a supplement right now, a solution called Liver Health Formula. It's an all-natural supplement that contains 12 clinically proven botanicals that help recharge and protect our liver. Let's do something for our liver as well as our health overall. So eating right, do that. Here we go. It's made in America. It's approved by American doctors, and over $2 million have already been sold. So you can try Liver Health Formula right now and get a free bottle of omega-3s to help keep your heart healthy as well. So go to getliverhelp.com/Spicer, getliverhelp.com/Spicer. You'll get your free bonus gift as well. So again, do something from your liver. Help yourself live longer and better. Go to getliverhelp.com/Spicer. The one thing about politics is the game of addition. You need more voters than less, right? And there is a lot of talk about how we grow the number of voters, especially in an election year. And for a lot of us, we are in an election year. There is a conservative activist, an organizer named Scott Presler, who has been doing yeoman's work for the last several years. He organized a cleanup in Baltimore in 2019 that was unbelievably successful. Out of nowhere, got 200 volunteers and removed 12 tons of trash from the city in 12 hours. But more importantly, he's been going around using these same skill sets from city to city, state to state, Florida, Louisiana, Kentucky, Virginia. He's in Pennsylvania now, encouraging voting, getting people who are not registered to register to vote and understand the importance and consequence of actually getting out there and being part of the electorate. So I want to talk to him about what he's doing and how we can expand his efforts. It is my pleasure to welcome in Scott Presler. Scott, welcome to the show. Thanks for being with us today.
Hey, thank you, Sean, for having me.
So look, I want to ask you this question because I was trying to describe it to my audience. How would you describe yourself? I've said activist, organizer. What do you say?
I'd say flowing, long hair, majestic, conservative activist who's here to make Joe Biden a one-term president.
All right. Well, that'll fit. I'll have to figure out if we can fit that on there. So how did you start this whole idea? I mean, take me back a little ways. I know you've been involved in politics, both in Virginia and other places. What got you involved in specifically involved in the organizing and the registration piece of this?
Well, a little bit of my background, I graduated from George Mason in Fairfax, Virginia, wanted to be a police officer. I couldn't find a job in my field, walked dogs for a living, went on to work at an elementary school. But I really owe my political journey to none other than President Obama. And it was the day that he was reelected in 2012 that I created my Twitter account. I ended up moving in 2014. My first job ever was helping to elect now Governor Greg Abbott in the great state of Texas. And I went on to spend 2 years of my life to defeat Hillary Clinton and elect Donald Trump. But it was really in 2014, organizing in Texas, working with the grassroots, door knocking, registering voters, going on college campuses that I found my love in politics and I found my passion. And so now I've turned this into, I'm traveling the country, spearheading voter registration efforts across the states, and I'm here to make sure that next year we have success and we win.
So how do you get do you get funding for this, and if so, by whom?
Well, I'm probably not the best businessman. I did create an organization called Early Vote Action, earlyvoteaction.com. But to give your viewers an example of how grassroots I am, I mean, I sleep in people's homes. I'm not staying in five-star hotels. I'm literally cuddling with people's animals, eating with them and their families as I travel the country. And so if people want to support my work, they may go to earlyvoteaction.com. But I'd even just like people's help registering voters and knocking on doors. I just want people to take action.
So you've gone around, you're in Pennsylvania now. You've done this in Virginia. You mentioned Texas. And so walk me through the process. Do you just show up and say, I want to go down a list of folks and find out who's not registered? And I mean, because if you look at your Twitter account, it's here's how many people I got today. Here's what I'm doing. So what's the process like?
Well, sometimes people will reach out to me. So they'll slide into my DMs, like the National Federation of Arizona Republican Women, and they'll invite me to an event. Or they'll want me to come to Kentucky to help elect Daniel Cameron as the next governor this November. So some of it is people reaching out to me. And other things are like, for example, at Early Vote Action, we're focused on 5 states: Arizona, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And so over the years, I've developed relationships with people across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And so I'm here to bump up our voter registration numbers. So I went to Slippery Rock University. I'm here at Penn State University. Today I'll be in Crawford County, PA. And we're going to be knocking on doors for our local candidates because this November, we do have a very important Pennsylvania Supreme Court election to hopefully elect Judge Carolyn Carluccio as the next justice in PA. And so some of it is my own doing, and some of it is from the community wanting me to come in. But I'm definitely focused on Arizona, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And this November, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, New Jersey, Virginia.
And so here's the thing that I find interesting. I've been doing politics. My first race was in the 94 cycle. Why you? I mean, what I don't get is that these guys should be able to do this on their own. You come in and you're like, bam, 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 and you put points on the board. What is it that you're doing that they need your help with? Because I feel like in some cases, it's almost like a motivational speaker. You're getting in there saying, hey, get off your butt, go out, knock on these doors, get this done.
Well, in part, Sean, I'm here out of necessity. I mean, look, I am not here to point fingers. I'm not here to judge. But, I've been reaching out to the RNC, to the chairwoman of the party, for nearly 160 days without a response. And I'm here in part because I see a void that needs to be filled. For example, let me tell you about the letter writing campaigns we're doing. I have lists of thousands of new movers to Louisiana, to Kentucky, to Pennsylvania, to Wisconsin. And the party right now is not writing letters or reaching out to these new voters. So at earlyvoteaction.com, I literally have hundreds of volunteers across the country that are writing handwritten letters that I've given them a template. I've given each of them 5 names, and they're welcoming new voters into the party. They're making sure that they're registered to vote as a Republican in states like Pennsylvania, Nevada, Arizona, that they have closed primaries. And I'll tell you, based on voter registration data, these letter writing campaigns have been so successful that in Louisiana, for example, we're seeing a 25% return on investment of the people that we write to being registered to vote and being registered to vote as a Republican. And so there's the success to our methodology.
So how much of this you mentioned is data driven? In other words, are you looking at voter registration lists? You mentioned the new movers. These people, like, is it you're basing this off of voter registration lists of people that are registered that haven't voted? Like, what's the methodology behind this?
Well, the methodology is we're focusing on people that are not registered to vote.
Okay.
So this is growing the electorate. We literally have the list of people that aren't registered. And the way that I'm able to track data is, for example, in Louisiana, we get data on the 1st of every month. So I had September 1st for the August data. And I've been able to track that in the last couple months leading up to August, the Republican Party was only gaining or losing 600 voters. It was either gaining 600 or they saw a decrease in their numbers. But since we instituted the letter writing campaign in this last month, we saw a bump of 1,600 new registered Republicans. And even furthermore, the Democratic Party of Louisiana is losing people. And I know this is anecdotal, but I think it's also important to note that the Democratic Party of Louisiana is losing Black voters. And because of demographic data, I can tell you certainly that Republicans are gaining Black voters in Louisiana. So the work that we do at Early Vote Action is 100% data driven.
So Scott, when you, I mean, like I said, these are numbers that are clear as day. When you bring these to the campaign down in Louisiana, to the governor's race or to the state party, what do they say?
Well, as a PAC, as a political action committee, I am not legally or lawful allowed to work with candidates. Of course, my work is going to help elect Jeff Landry as the next governor of Louisiana and to elect Cameron as the next governor.
So take the coordination aside. I guess what I'm trying to get at here is, are people taking notice of this and saying, what is this guy doing? He doesn't even live here. He's coming down, bam, 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 a letter writing campaign and turning the tide.
Well, I think the relationships that I've built speak volumes. I do have a relationship with Florida GOP leaders, LA GOP, Oregon GOP, PA GOP, NV GOP. So there are leaders in the Republican Party across the country that are working hand in glove with our volunteers.
Well, as a Virginia, I know you spent a lot of time in Virginia Beach, Fairfax, you mentioned. Since we have elections, I'm hoping you could spend a little quality time in the Commonwealth before the election.
Oh, I promise you. Well, to your viewers, Sean, to everybody watching this right now, I'm making a plea to you. If you live in the Commonwealth of Virginia, this is so important. We have legislative elections this November, and we have every seat in the House of Delegates, basically the House of Representatives, and every seat in the Senate that is up for election. Now, we currently, in 2021, elected a Republican governor, Glenn Youngkin, and we flipped the House of Delegates. We control 2 chambers of the legislature. If we in Virginia flip 2 state Senate seats this November, then Governor Glenn Youngkin will have an entirely Republican legislature. And you hear me loud and clear. That means that on day 1 in 2024, we will be able to govern conservatively. Yeah. That means that people are going to be moving to Virginia from across the country because they're going to be inspired by Republican leadership. And furthermore, to everybody that wants to make Joe Biden a one-term president, if you Virginians give us that Republican legislature this November, Virginia is in play next year in 2024.
So when you do this and you get the results that you do, are people saying, I need to join this effort? I want to expand it? I feel like at some point the numbers are what they are, and there's got a lot of attention has got to come to it from these other states where they say, I saw what you did in Louisiana. I saw what you did in Florida. Can you come to, Kentucky or Montana or whatever? But what kind of attention are you getting from other Republican leaders because of the results?
Well, Florida, I think, is the best example that we flipped Florida Republican. I mean, a state that in 2012 had 500,000 more Democrats. Today in 2023, we have 500,000 more Republicans than Democrats registered, which is unprecedented, which is historic. And, I started leading the charge in 2019, talking about the voter registration deficit and the need to concentrate on voter registration. So I've been from Duval to Osceola to Seminole to Pinellas County, which we flipped from blue to red, to Miami-Dade to Hillsborough, Tampa. And our success in Florida, for example, Pennsylvania is 2012's Florida. And my goal is to do to Pennsylvania what we did flipping Florida from blue to red, and also expand those efforts to make sure that Arizona stays red, to flip Nevada from blue to red, to flip North Carolina, which coincidentally has more Democrats than Republicans. Right. But I'll tell you, everywhere that we have instituted my voter registration methodology, we are seeing results.
You mentioned non-voters. There was a story in USA Today about a week ago that said that there's roughly 90 to 100 million citizens that are registered that aren't voting. And they did a little deep dive on these folks. And they said the irony is that when you really break them down, they would tend to support President Trump, meaning these folks are registered to vote. They're just not voting. But I want to read you a part of this. It said the irony of ironies. When the unlikely voters were asked why they were registered but not voting next year, about 13% used the words election is rigged, corruption, unfair, don't like the voting process, mail-in ballots. These have been Trump's words the past 5 years, and the very people that could elect him have totally soured on elections and voting. So this is USA Today, a liberal newspaper, saying that the Trump message is in some way inhibiting a lot of registered voters from actually casting a ballot from him because his message seems to be deterring them. So number one, are you doing anything to get these folks? And number two, how can we turn these people out?
Yes, well, I want to make it clear. I'm staying neutral in the presidential primary. I'm not endorsing.
Okay, fair enough. But how do we get
Trump.
These people out?
Yes. Well, number one, we're focusing on adding to the electorate the unregistered voters. We're doing it by micro-targeting as well. For example, 40% of Wisconsin hunters are not registered to vote. So it's about finding what is the issue that appeals to the voter. Because I can't just come out to people and talk about illegal immigration if Second Amendment is their issue. What does the voter care about, and how can I target them, get them registered to vote, and get them out to vote? Now, it also is an educational campaign. For example, our truckers who supply our country, they are mostly conservative. Truckers may not be home on election day. Truckers are going to be outside the state.
Right.
So it also means having a robust get out the vote campaign that if I have a group of people like pilots and police officers that are maybe not going to be in town during election day, it's making sure that they are educated on early in-person voting, on getting a mail-in ballot, on talking about how, for example, that in Pennsylvania, we have 50 days of early voting, and they, instead of using a drop box or using the United States postal system, they can vote early in person at their elections office. So a lot of this is talking about the different ways that we can stop shenanigans, we can mitigate election fraud, and we can lock in every vote to make sure that every Republican is getting his or her vote in on or before Election Day.
You mentioned you've been tweeting at the chairwoman of the RNC, Ronna McDaniel, noting how many days it's been. What has anyone from the National Party acknowledged you and your work?
Well, I'll tell you that, I want to be classy and I want to be respectful, but I will say that recently I have worked with Casey Crosby, who is the treasurer of the RNC out of Kentucky, because we're working to make sure that we're electing Daniel Cameron as the next governor of that state. And so Casey Crosby, fact-checked me, I believe is the number 3 in charge at the RNC. So there are some leaders that do see value in the work that I'm doing. And you know what? I want to make it clear. If the chairwoman ever reaches out to me, if Drew McKissick ever reaches out, I'm a team player and my door is always open.
But and I know Harmeet Dillon was very supportive of you when she was running.
Absolutely.
But what I don't get is winning in politics is a game of addition, not subtraction. You are out there. The thing that's interesting to me is the work that you're doing is the expensive work. It's time consuming and it's expensive. To do paid efforts on this front are very expensive. And what you're doing is relieving a financial burden from the National Party that they need to be spending on data and other things. I would just assume that they would appreciate what you're doing and would be calling you back. Is there what am I missing? Did you guys have a falling out, or are they just, I don't get it.
It would be nice to receive accolades for the work that we're doing. But look, at the end of the day, Sean, it's not about me. This isn't about President Trump.
But if I were them, I'd say, Scott,
defeating Joe Biden.
Right. This isn't, I get you don't want the accolades. It's very humble of you. But what I'm telling you is that as someone who worked at the party before, I'd want to call you and be like, hey, Scott, you're totally helping out the team. Thanks for doing this. What can we do to support your efforts?
It would be nice. And again, if that happens, excellent. But until then, we're going to continue to lead by example at earlyvoteaction.com.
So you also tweeted out, Democrats use an army of influencers who are dedicated to reaching the youth. Is the GOP doing the same? What do you think that the party needs to do more of? And what do you see as the differences between what the Democratic Party is doing and the Republican Party to get people engaged and motivated and registered?
Well, look at Joe Biden's army of influencers that I've seen. I'm not going to name their names because I don't want to give them any credibility, but they were all invited to the White House recently. And they're receiving the talking points, they're receiving the memos, they're receiving information to put on TikTok and Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. And so they're all swimming in the same direction. And they're using all of their influence in order to reelect Joe Biden. And they have a message for the youth. But I will tell you, Sean, having just spent the last 3 days at 2 different universities that are supposed to be liberal here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the issues that I'm seeing is young people care about the unaffordable nature that we're experiencing. Gas is too high, food is too high, inflation, they can't buy a car. They want to raise a family. They don't want the sexualization of children. They don't want the illegal immigration that we just had an illegal immigrant on the loose here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. They don't want the censorship. And so they want freedom. They don't want the lockdowns. They don't want the mask mandates. But nobody is talking about these issues. Nobody is giving this package to the youth. And that's why, in part, I'm doing this work, because I'm not seeing it from the party. I'm not seeing it from the RNC. And that means that we have to do it.
So when you go on a college campus, like you mentioned, you're there at Penn State today, what's the reaction that you get?
Oh, well, I think at first, because I'm 6'5", I got all this long hair and boots, I probably stick out just a little bit here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. But I'll tell you, I had some kids coming up to me saying, "You're Scott Pressler." So the message has been resonating that I am reaching out to the youth. But I talked to them. I said, look, if you don't want the mask mandates, if you don't want the lockdowns that are coming, and because we have a Democratic Governor Shapiro in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, if you want the freedom to choose that you don't have the government telling you what you can and cannot do, then register to vote as a Republican and help elect Judge Carolyn Carluccio to the Supreme Court this November. When you break it down and you talk about those issues, like, for example, that America is supplying the rest of the world with funding while we have 500,000 homeless Americans in our country. When you talk about the America First mantra, that resonates with Gen Z.
How many other people have you come across that are trying to do what you're doing?
I think there is a willingness and there is a motivation of people to help, but people don't know how to. They don't know how to get started. They want to, and that's why I'm here. So when people say, Scott, I want to do something, what can I do? I live in Connecticut. Then I'll say, hey, if you will mail 5 letters that you will provide 5 postage stamps for, I'll help you make sure that you're registering new voters in Louisiana, Kentucky, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. Or we're actually doing a day of action this Saturday, Sean, September 23rd. And I'm asking everybody to download my mobile application, Early Vote Action. And it's really cool because what it does is it gives you a list of registered Republican voters in your neighborhood within a mile radius. And the reason why that's important, and some people may say, Scott, what about the independent voter? What about the Democrat? In my opinion, in this off-year election in 2023, this is a Republican-based turnout.
Yep.
If we simply got out every Republican, we'd win the election. And so I'm asking people to knock on 5 doors this Saturday in Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. And if you live in Arizona, certainly you can help get out the vote for the primary next year. If you live in Anchorage, Alaska, you can help gather signatures to help stop ranked choice voting in that state. But my goal at Early Vote Action is to empower people that want to help but don't know how to.
Yeah. ranked choice voting is like a trigger word for me because I think it is a scam perpetrated by the left. Yeah, I'm glad you're addressing that as well. Scott, let me just ask you before we let you go, because every second that I'm taking up as a voter that you're not registering, if people want to help, bottom line it for us. I know you mentioned the day of action this Saturday. I'll tell you, it's my birthday on Saturday, so I hope people for my birthday, go out and help Scott register voters in those states. What is it? What else can they do to help this effort?
Well, again, if you are able to knock on the doors, please knock on 5 this weekend. If not, and let's say that you have great handwriting and you have plenty of time, then please go to earlyvoteaction.com, sign up as a volunteer, and sign up to write postcards. And literally, you'll receive an email from me. I do all this work myself, giving you a template, giving you names to write to, and you will help be able to register voters to make sure that we have victory this November. We also have phone calling. I mean, we're building coalitions across the country, from moms to Black Muslims in Pennsylvania to the Amish community to students. So we're also doing coalition building across the country, and we'd love to work with you at earlyvoteaction.com.
Okay. Scott Pressler, thanks for all the work you're doing. And it's great to know that somebody took action and is getting results out there. So appreciate you joining us, and thanks for all your work.
Hey, thank you, Sean. Happy birthday.
Thank you. All right. I love that discussion with Scott, because when I was at the RNC, I used to hear, here's what the party should do. Here's what the party should do. Well, guess what? The party is 200 people at a building in Washington, D.C. You are the party. He is the party. We are the movement. If you don't like something, go do it. Get out there. Look at what he's doing. He's in Pennsylvania, Virginia, Kentucky, Florida, Louisiana. He's making it happen, and he's getting real results. And this is what we have to do. Politics is a game of addition, as I said earlier. Look at what Scott Presler is doing. He's going out and putting points on the board. He's growing the pie, and he's explaining to them why their vote is important and why engaging is important. This is what we need more of. It's expensive, as I said. The party can't pay for this. Outside groups usually do this, and that's what the Dems do. Scott Presler is showing. So go sign up for his app. If you can't help him, do something on this Saturday. Give him those 5 people that you can reach out to make sure that they're engaged, because especially for us in Virginia and people all over the country, New Jersey, this is going to be critical. Tomorrow, we've got a great panel discussion for you, as always, on Thursdays. And then Friday, Andy Puzder, the former CEO of CK Restaurants, which is the parent company of Hardee's and Carl's Jr. He was Trump's Labor Department nominee. We're going to talk to him about Bidenomics, the economy, what's going on in business, what the climate change and how much of that is real as far as its impact on business and leaders. So we've got a couple great days of shows headed your way. Thanks for all your support being here. I look forward to seeing you right back here tomorrow on The Sean Spicer Show. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.